You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. It was really tough for me to decide what to start with. Do I start with the World Series? Or do I start with one of the craziest weeks that the NFL has had in a really long time? Ultimately, I decided on the NFL. Feel like there's more to talk about there. Feel like the stories are a little more interesting. I mean, this really was a crazy week. You have 4 backup quarterbacks winning, one throwing for over 400 yards. You had blowout wins, blockbuster transactions. Maybe if the Braves had won yesterday, I'd start with the World Series, but I'll start with the NFL. Specifically, Titans-Colts. The big story there is that Derrick Henry broke a bone in his foot, specifically the 5th metatarsal bone. And it seems like he's going to be out for the year. It is impossible to overstate the importance of this injury to the Titans. It's hard to think of an offense that's more reliant on a single person than the Titans offense. Maybe the Saints offense with Alvin Kamara? But Henry's right up there. You know, the reality is, once you have these offenses that are so reliant on a single person, you're playing with fire every down. If that guy gets hurt, forget about it. You're done. I mean, now the Titans starting running back is going to be Jeremy McNichols. Now the Titans offense rests on the right arm of Ryan Tannehill. A guy who really has not had a great season this year. He's thrown just 10 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. I mean, the Titans had a big win over the Colts yesterday. Give Randy Bullock a ton of credit. And give the Titans defense credit for feasting on Carson Wentz. Wentz threw 2 big interceptions late that basically gifted the Titans this game. I mean, now the Titans are 3 games up on the Colts. The Colts no longer control their own destiny. The Colts already had their 2 games against the Titans. And you take a look at the schedule that the Titans have coming up. Yes, they have the Sunday night game against the Rams. That's going to be a rout. The Rams are going to destroy the Titans. But you close with the Saints, the Texans, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Steelers, the Niners, the Dolphins, and the Texans. The Titans are really lucky that they had an incredibly easy schedule this year. Yes, they're going to get their doors blown off against the Rams. No question about that. But they should be able to tread water enough so that they win the AFC South. Will they be eliminated in the first round? Yes, but at least you'll be in the playoffs. I mean, this is tough for the Titans. They had aspirations of going on another big run in the playoffs. Now that's not going to happen. But look, you'll be in the playoffs. You'll win your division. And maybe you win a game. Maybe. Depending on who you go up against. Depending on that team's injuries. I don't know. This is tough for the Titans. No question about that. But it's not a death blow. They will make the playoffs. They won't make a ton of noise when they get there, but they'll be in the playoffs. A team that definitely won't be in the playoffs is the Detroit Lions. I mean, I really want to talk about them. The NFL's last winless team is now 0-8. They got destroyed by the Eagles 44-6. At one point, the Eagles were up 38-0. That was headed into the fourth quarter. To have that type of a game against a dreadful Eagles team is inexcusable. To allow Boston Scott and Jordan Howard to both have 2 rushing touchdowns is inexcusable. To give up 44 points when the opposing quarterback only throws for 103 yards is almost impossible. Look, you knew this year would be bad for the Lions. Did anyone think it would be this bad? For goodness sake, they're 0-8. How can you look at any of their games coming up and say, yeah, they can win that game. They're going to avoid a winless season. I mean, I'm trying to find anything positive to say about the Lions. I can't. They've lost close games. They've lost heartbreaking games. They've gotten blown out. They've lost every which way imaginable. Again, you knew they'd be bad. You didn't think they'd be this bad. Let me ask you this. Does Dan Campbell survive? Does Brad Holmes survive? Do the Lions blow things up? It's hard to find any sliver of hope with the Lions right now. You want to tell me I'm piling on, I'm beating a dead horse? Yeah, maybe I am, but realize, my team's 2-5. Yes, they won yesterday. Great win, totally get that, but it's nice to know that they're really not the worst team in the NFL. Like, last year they were. I don't care that the Jaguars had a worse record. The Jets were worse. This year, no chance of the Jets the worst team in the NFL. The Lions are a million times worse. The Texans are worse. The Dolphins are probably worse. I just don't understand how the Lions can think to themselves that they're going to be relevant at any point soon. You want to tell me they have young guns? You want to tell me they have some big picks coming up? I understand that, But you better hit on those picks. I mean, the Lions have tried to build through the draft for a long time. Maybe for a couple years with Stafford at the helm it worked. But I'm having Matt Millen flashbacks. Having those big picks and squandering them. It's tough. It's really, really tough to find anything positive about the Lions. TJ Hawkinson isn't having a great season. DeAndre Swift is having a really bad sophomore season. Jared Goff is looking really bad. This guy has only thrown 1 touchdown in his last 4 games. I mean, I like Goff, but it's tough to defend him. It's just tough to be optimistic about them right now. I just don't know how they get back to relevancy in the near future. Moving on now to Buccaneers Saints. An upset win that was right up there with the Jets' upset win in terms of improbability. Jameis Winston leaves early with an ACL injury. Trevor Siemian comes in and somehow, someway finds a way to beat the Buccaneers. That's a bad loss for the Bucs. A, you lose to a division rival. But B, Todd Bowles is supposed to be a defensive genius. And he allows Trevor Siemian to beat him? A guy who before that game had only played a quarter and a half since 2019? Yeah, he has starting experience from his days with the Broncos. But those days are long gone. You can't allow Trevor Siemian to beat you. That's a bad loss for the Bucs. You've got Brady throwing the uncharacteristic interception to P.J. Williams that sealed that win for the Saints. This was a game that the Buccaneers should have won easily. Bill Belichick used to love feasting on backup quarterbacks. He used to love cramming it down opposing teams' throats that his quarterback was 1,000,000 times better. Believe me, I know. But for the Buccaneers to blow that game the way they did, that's a really tough loss. And now you look at the NFC South, things are getting a little interesting. The Buccaneers are only a half game up on the Saints. The Saints play the Falcons next week. The Falcons aren't that good. They just lost Calvin Ridley for the foreseeable future. And I'll get into that in a minute. But my point is, that's a winnable game for the Saints. They could tie the Buccaneers for the lead in the NFC South very easily. Of course, they'll have to do it with Trevor Siemian at the helm, assuming they don't trade for a quarterback before tomorrow, or they don't bring in a free agent. I mean, right when you saw Winston get hurt, and you saw him on crutches after the game, you saw people saying on Twitter, Drew Brees is coming back. There's no way he's going to leave the Saints to die like this. He's going to come back, rally the troops, and the Saints will overtake the Buccaneers. But no, he's really happy at NBC. Also, I'll say this. You weren't getting the former Pro Bowler, Drew Brees. You were getting last year's Drew Brees. A shell of his former self. Could still get the job done. Won a playoff game. But it's not like you were getting the perennial MVP candidate. The reality is Drew Brees at this point wouldn't be much better than Simeon. Drew Brees from 5 years ago, yes. This Drew Brees, no. And also, the Saints aren't going to bring in Cam Newton. They're going to roll with Simeon. Strange. Very strange that they wouldn't bring in Cam Newton. They get turned down by Brees, that's one thing. But to not even consider Newton, that's strange. I mean, it's fair to wonder at this point, is Cam Newton's NFL career over? If the Saints aren't going to bring him in after losing Winston, who's bringing him in? Cam Newton could run that Saints offense very easily. You wouldn't need to change much. For the Saints to not even be considering Cam Newton, that's really surprising. And I don't see how Newton is able to resurrect his NFL career. If the Saints, a team with a tailor-made offense for him, aren't even going to give him a chance, what other team will? Newton's done. Moving on now to Cowboys Vikings. Somehow, some way, Cooper Rush was able to lead the Cowboys past the Vikings on Sunday Night Football. You have no idea how desperately Cowboys fans wanted Dak Prescott to try to tough this out. I mean, part of that was probably PTSD from last year, having to roll with Andy Dalton and Ben DiNucci. But no one knew anything about Cooper Rush. I mean, who would you rather have? Cooper Rush or Garrett Gilbert? Some Cowboys fans would say Gilbert. But Rush was actually pretty good. Completed 24 of 40 passes for 325 yards and 2 touchdowns. He engineered a game-winning drive late in the fourth quarter. That's incredible. He spread the wealth around a lot. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb both had over 110 receiving yards. Cedric Wilson had 3 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown. Granted, one of those was a 73-yard touchdown pass, but still, 84 yards is pretty darn good. Now, let me say this about the Vikings. Mike Zimmer is firmly on the hot seat. The Vikings are 3-4. They're in the wild card hunt, no question about that. They're only a half game behind the Panthers, and the Panthers aren't world beaters. The Vikings can overtake them, but this Vikings offense looks really bad. Their defense looks dreadful. Look, I like Mike Zimmer. I think overall he's a good coach. But there are some cases where coaches just wear out their welcome with certain teams. And you get the sense that that's what's happening now. The lack of playoff success, despite all that star power on offense, giving Kirk Cousins the big contract, you have Dalvin Cook, you have Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, then you trade him, you draft Justin Jefferson. Jefferson looks great. The Vikings really should be a lot better than this. It just seems like Zimmer's message has gotten stale, which is okay, because he's been there for 8 seasons. But the Vikings may need to make a change sooner rather than later if they want to get that last wildcard spot in the NFC. I'll say this, I think Zimmer would land on his feet. Even though he's on the older side, he's 65. Overall, he's 67, 51-1 as a head coach. Has never had a worse season than 7-9. That's pretty darn good. I'd take him. I'll tell you that right now. Not over Robert Saleh, but if I'm starting a team from scratch, I wouldn't mind Zimmer as my head coach. Alright, now it's time to talk about the blockbuster trade. I wanted to talk about the games first, but now it's time to talk about this blockbuster trade. The Broncos traded Von Miller to the Rams in exchange for their second and third rounders in this coming draft. In case you're wondering if the Rams have any picks left, the answer is no, not really. They have a compensatory third rounder that they got for the Lions hiring Brad Holmes as their GM. Since Holmes is black, the NFL gifted the Rams 2 extra picks. That's a new rule that's in place for all teams. In essence, it awards you for cultivating the careers of front office executives that are minorities. Give the NFL credit for trying, but to get back to my main point, the Rams have that pick. They have a 5th rounder. They have the Dolphins' 7th rounder, and they have their own 7th rounder. That's it. They have just 4 picks in this coming draft. The year after, it's better. They have their 2nd, their 3rd, their 5th, the Packers' 6th, their own 6th, and a 7th rounder. Either their 7th rounder or the Lions' 7th rounder. You gotta admire the aggressiveness by the Rams. I mean, there's never been a team before in NFL history that has consistently traded their draft picks like this. Sure, there have been NFL trades involving a bunch of draft picks. Herschel Walker, Ricky Williams. But in terms of quantity of trades, the Rams just blow other teams out of the water. It's incredible if you stop and think about it. And you can't begrudge the logic. Now think about this defense. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and Von Miller. It does not get any better than that. Eat your heart out, fearsome foursome. Is Miller on the older side? The answer is yes. He's 32. But he's still great. He has an 85.6 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. He has 5 sacks this year. He's great. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's Von Miller. He's a Super Bowl MVP. I understand that the Rams are technically behind the Cardinals in the standings. But how do you not look at the Rams as Super Bowl favorites right now? To add Von Miller to that team, that's nothing short of incredible. And you have Matthew Stafford having a great season. Cooper Kupp is having one of the best seasons in NFL history for a wide receiver. That's not hyperbole, by the way. The Rams have played 8 games. Kupp already has 63 catches for 924 yards and 10 touchdowns. This guy could break all the records. Darrell Henderson's having a really good season. What's been the Rams' issue this year? Defense. Well, they just fixed it. They just added Von freaking Miller. It literally doesn't get any better than that. You want to tell me it's a lot to give up for a guy who is going to be a free agent at the end of the year? Yeah, it is. But it's a worthwhile gamble. The Rams are going for it this year. They want to win a Super Bowl. That's what happens when you trade for Matthew Stafford. That's what happens when you have Cooper Kupp. I don't begrudge the Rams for giving up a couple more draft picks. They've already gotten this far, go a little further. I don't mind that. I mean, think about the NFC right now. The NFC, without question, has the 5 best teams in the NFL. In no particular order, you have the Packers, Cardinals, Cowboys, Buccaneers, and Rams. Sort those 5 teams however you want, but those are the 5 best teams in the NFL. The best team in the AFC is probably the Ravens or Bills. All due respect to those teams, they're really good teams. Not as good as any of those 5 teams that I just mentioned. It's going to be a dogfight in the NFC to close out this season. For who gets home field advantage, for who gets that one bye to go straight to the divisional round. Oh, it's going to be so much fun. As for the Broncos, this is tough. This is a tough sell to your fans. Von Miller is, without question, the best player that the Rams have had since probably John Elway. You want to tell me Terrell Davis? I'll take Miller over Davis. You want to tell me Champ Bailey? It's close. It's very, very close. But you gotta remember, Bailey had a lot of years without playoff success. Miller has 2. But Miller has Super Bowl MVP. Bailey doesn't. Very close between Von Miller and Champ Bailey, but I think I'd take Miller. I'm taking Von Miller over Demaryius Thomas. Granted, it's close. The point is, Von Miller is one of the greatest Broncos ever. And not for nothing, but the Broncos have a real chance to make the playoffs this year. They're 4-4. They're only a game behind the Bengals for the first wild card spot. yes, they're 1-4 in their last 5. They really haven't inspired a ton of confidence in you if you're a Broncos fan. But to give up on the season when you're 4-4 and you're right in the thick of the playoff hunt, that's tough. That's a really tough sell to Broncos fans. I mean, look, let's play this scenario out. The Broncos either make the playoffs or miss the playoffs. Doesn't really matter for what I'm going to say next. If they make the playoffs, they're probably not going to win a game. So, it's really a wash. I understand you'd rather make the playoffs and get eliminated in the first round than miss the playoffs altogether, but for what I'm going to say next, it really doesn't matter. If Von Miller leaves and goes anywhere else, the Broncos would only be in line for a 5th round pick. So what would you rather have if you're George Paton? A 2nd and a 3rd? And no chance of making the playoffs? Or a 5th rounder and maybe you make the playoffs, maybe, but you're not going to make any noise once you get there. I understand that logic. It's just a really tough sell. The Broncos have been really bad for a long time. Since winning the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, they haven't even been in the playoffs. They've gone through how many quarterbacks? Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Brandon Allen, Brett Rippon, and Teddy Bridgewater. Don't you want to give Broncos fans something to hold on to? Even if it's just a wild card round exit? This is just a tough sell to Broncos fans. I understand the logic behind the trade. It makes sense. But if you know a Broncos fan, and I do, shout out Anthony. Call him, text him, and tell him that you feel sorry for him. Because this is a hard one. The Rams win this trade. Moving on now to Calvin Ridley stepping away from football for the time being. He tweeted out a statement saying that he needs to focus on his mental well-being. It'll help him be the best that he can possibly be. And I applaud Calvin Ridley for this. Think about who Calvin Ridley is. He's a football player. Some of the toughest people on earth are football players. They get hit constantly. They're always playing through pain. They are the epitome of toughness. But here's a guy in Calvin Ridley who's a really good wide receiver. Last year, he had 90 catches for 1,374 yards and 9 touchdowns. Yes, he's taken a step back this year. But I take him on my team in a minute. Here's a guy in Ridley saying, time out, I need to take a step back. I need to focus on me for a little bit. Look, a lot of people ignore their own mental health. And they do so at their own peril. Whether it costs them their job, their family, or worse, A lot of people ignore mental health symptoms. It's terrible. The stigma that we as a society put on the mentally ill is disgraceful. It's okay to not be okay. I think it's worse to know you need help and not get it than it is to get help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. So let me get this straight. You know you have an issue, but you're not going to fix it? You want to tough it out? You're torturing the people around you? Yeah, that'll work. For Calvin Ridley to really put his face on mental health struggles is incredibly courageous. I really applaud Ridley for this. Look, it's okay if you're upset at him as a Falcons fan. You really don't have a ton to be optimistic about. Matt Ryan's nearing the end of the line. Mike Davis really hasn't been anything special. Cordero Patterson has been really good, but can you build around him? You really only had Kyle Pitts and Calvin Ridley. Now it's just Pitts. It's okay to be upset at that, but you gotta realize that Ridley is dealing with something a lot more important. You know, it's like when CJ Mosley opted out last year over COVID concerns. As a human, I totally understood it. I supported it. As a Jets fan, I hated it. You can wear two hats. You can have your Falcons hat on and say, hey, I don't like this. I want to see Ridley out there. I really like him. He has a bright future. I want to see him play every Sunday. It's okay to be upset that you're not going to see that. But realize that you also need to have your human hat on and say, you know what, Ridley's dealing with some stuff right now. He's not retiring. He's just taking a step back. He'll come back. He'll be fine. He'll get this sorted out. I wish him nothing but the best. Don't be upset at Calvin Ridley. If anything, admire his courage. Because he's a lot tougher than the vast majority of NFL players. Alright, now it's time to get to the World Series. And I gotta tell you, a lot of people have this wrong. There were a lot of people criticizing Brian Snitker for, in essence, punting yesterday's game away. Realize he didn't use Matzek, he didn't use Jackson, he didn't use Smith. The only real high leverage guy he used was AJ Minter. And Minter got shelled. He got saddled with the loss. He gave up the 3 runs in the 5th inning that made it 7-5 Astros. And the Astros wouldn't look back. The thing is, though, the Braves were up 3-1. When you're up 3-1, you can afford to try to live for another day. I mean, think about the alternative. Snitker goes all out. And he brings in Luke Jackson early, which results in Matzek coming in early, which results in Smith coming in early. Their arms would be like jelly. if you lose that game, and there's a great chance that you would, regardless of who came in, because the Astros offense finally woke up. Good job by Dusty Baker in shuffling around the lineup, moving Bregman down, moving Correa up, moving Gurriel up. You're going into Game 6 with an incredibly tired bullpen. A bullpen full of guys that would try to tough it out. There's no question. But how effective would they be? A, their arms would be ready to fall off. But B, the more often you see a reliever as a hitter, the more comfortable you are against them. Zach Britton's 100% right. Think about what Snitker did. He gave his 3 big guns an extra day off. Yes, they'd have today, regardless, because it's a travel day. But they got yesterday off also. They needed that. Because these guys have pitched in almost every game. You keep running relievers out there, you're playing with fire. Eventually, those guys can implode, and you're screwed. Now, you're going to have a rested bullpen for tomorrow. I understand that Max Fried hasn't inspired any confidence in you whatsoever. Already had the great start against the Brewers in Game 2 of the NLDS. And in Game 1 of the NLCS, he was solid. He only gave up 2 runs. He gave up 8 hits, but 2 runs. He got shellacked by the Dodgers in Game 5, and he got shellacked by the Astros in Game 2 of the World Series. I totally get it if you're skeptical of what Max Fried is going to do tomorrow. But I'll take him over Luis Garcia, especially since Garcia is pitching on 3 days rest. Why on earth did Dusty Baker bring in Jose Urquidy? That made literally 0 sense. You bring in Urquidy to pitch the 4th inning when you're down 1. Okay, look, he pitched a scoreless inning. Good for him. There's no one else in that bullpen that you can use. Ryan Presley didn't pitch yesterday, so why wouldn't you bring in Maton earlier, then Stanek earlier, then Graveman earlier, and then you bring in Presley? There, done. I just solved it. And you have Urquidy for Game 6. Come on, who would you rather have pitching? Luis Garcia on 3 days rest? Who couldn't even make it out of the 4th inning of Game 3? Or Jose Urquidy on extra rest when he got the win in Game 2, pitched 5 innings of 2-run ball? The answer is Urquidy. It is up to the Braves to seize upon this moment. Max Fried needs to get his act together. In a perfect world, he'd give the Braves 6 solid innings. You can bring in Jackson for the 7th, Matzek for the 8th, and Smith for the 9th. You don't need to overextend anyone. You can stick with the 3 guys that you're most comfortable with. And you're okay. But that's also incumbent on the Braves getting to Garcia. Realize, Brian Snitker has shown that even if his pitcher is dealing, he'll pull him early. Ian Anderson was throwing a no-hitter through 5 innings. He'd only thrown 76 pitches, and he got pulled for E.J. Minter. It was a 1-0 game. Snitker wanted to keep it at 1-0 because his offense really wasn't doing much, and he wanted to keep the score right there. But if the Braves can feast on a Luis Garcia that's pitching on short rest, then Snitker can roll with Fried for a little bit longer. You can bring in Jackson for the 7th, Matzek for the 8th, and Smith for the 9th. And you'll win the first World Series in Braves history since 1995. It actually looks really good for the Braves right now. I know I picked the Braves to win this World Series. Did I say Braves in 6? I think I did. It's looking really good right now. I'll say that. I'll close this show out by eulogizing a couple athletes that tragically died on Saturday. The first is Dick Zamanski. He died at the age of 89. You think of the Colts of the late 50s to the late 60s. You think of guys like Johnny Unitas, Alan Amici, Raymond Berry, Lenny Moore, Jim Parker, Gino Marchetti, etc., etc. It would take you a while to get to Dick Zamanski. But Dick Zamanski was a really good Baltimore Colt. Zamanski was drafted in the 2nd round of the 1955 draft out of Notre Dame, and started every game at center his rookie season, and was really, really good. He made the Pro Bowl. Unfortunately for him, in 56, he was in the military, and it took him a while to recover from that. So in 1958, when the Colts won the greatest game ever played, Zamanski was a reserve. He was backing up Buzz Nutter at center. Now, no one remembers this. The year afterwards, the Colts beat the Giants again in the NFL championship. Not as dramatically as in 58, but still, they won the championship. Zamanski transitioned over to defense and was solid there, but he was much better at center. So in 1961, when Nutter was traded to the Steelers, Zamanski moved back to his natural center position. And that was when Zamanski really made a name for himself. He made the Pro Bowl in 62 and 64. In 64, the Colts were in the NFL championship game, but they got shut out by the Browns 27-0. all of the Browns' points were scored in the second half. It was a dreadful performance by the Colts. Now, Zamanski was around for the 1968 season. Obviously, that was Super Bowl III, best moment in New York Jets history. A close second is the Mike White game. No, I'm only kidding. But obviously, Super Bowl III, best moment in Jets history. Zamanski didn't start, though. The year before, the Colts had traded for Bill Curry from the Packers. They let Curry sit for the 67 season, but he was younger, he was the future, he was really good, so he started every game that year at center. Zamanski was just a backup. Zamanski did stick around with the Colts, though. He was in their front office for a while, and was even their GM for a little bit. From 1977 to 1982, Zamanski was in charge. He had one good year, 1977. The Colts went 10-4. They lost a great double overtime game to the Raiders, 37-31, in the divisional round. That was the ghost to the post game. But unfortunately, after that, the Colts fell off a cliff. In 82, they went 0-8-1. And a couple years later, they moved to Indianapolis. Yeah, Zamanski wasn't a great GM, but he was a good center. He was a really good center. That's how we should remember him. Don't let his failed time as GM cloud his legacy. The second death is really, really sad. It's Jerry Remy. He died on Saturday at the age of 68 from lung cancer. You knew he was sick. He threw out the first pitch at the wild card game with an oxygen tube in his nose. But this is still really sad. I mean, Jerry Remy was a beloved figure in Boston. I mean, his popularity rivaled that of guys like David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez and Dustin Pedroia and guys like that. Remy was absolutely beloved. He didn't start his career with the Red Sox, though. He started with the California Angels. He carved out a role for himself as a light-hitting second baseman who could steal a ton of bases. Every year with the Angels, he stole at least 34 bases. Midway through the 77 season, Remy was named captain of the Angels. But that didn't stop the Angels from moving on from him. The Red Sox made a really strong offer. They had a really good young starter by the name of Don Ossie. A guy who in his rookie year went 6-2 with a 3.12 ERA. It looked like he was going to be a really good starter for a long time. So when the Red Sox came calling and wanted Remy to fill their second base hole because Denny Doyle was not getting the job done, and they offered Ossie, the Angels really had to take it. Now, Remy had a really good year for the Red Sox in 78. He made his only All-Star team. He hit .278. He had 30 steals. He came oh so close to making the playoffs. Obviously, you know what happened in 78. The Boston Massacre, the one-game playoff, the Bucky Dent home run. What you may not know is that more happened after that. Just to give you the Cliff Notes version, the Red Sox were down 5-2 entering the bottom of the eighth. They came storming back against Goose Gossage. They had runners on first and second, one man out. They were down 5-4. But Butch Hobson flew out to Lou Piniella in right field. And George Scott struck out. The Red Sox did make some noise in the ninth inning. With Rick Burleson at first and one man out, Jerry Remy hit a single to move Burleson to second. So tying run in scoring position, winning run at first, that would be the last hit that the Red Sox would get in that game. Jim Rice hit a sac fly to right, and Carl Yastrzemski popped out to Greg Nettles at third. Yankees win 5-4. That was really the high watermark of Remy's playing career. He got hurt in 79. He got hurt in 80. He even got hurt in 81, the strike-shortened season. Came back in 82 and 83, but didn't have the speed that made him so good. He faded out after the 84 season when the Red Sox decided to roll with Marty Barrett. That was the right decision because Barrett had a solid career with the Red Sox. Remy wouldn't stay out of baseball for long, though. From 1988 to, realistically, this past season, he was the regular color commentator on NESN for Red Sox games. Didn't matter who he was with. Ned Martin, Sean McDonough, Bob Kurtz, Don Orsillo, or Dave O'Brien, he was great. And I'm saying this as a Yankees fan. Jerry Remy was a great color commentator. I mean, this guy opened restaurants. This guy wrote books. He was inducted into the Red Sox Hall of Fame in 2006. Here's how popular he was. In 2007, when the Red Sox had a quote-unquote presidential election for the title of President of Red Sox Nation, Remy won. Unfortunately for him, he had his demons. He smoked a lot. And he got really sick because of that. He had bouts of cancer. He had bouts of pneumonia. He was not a well man. It's so sad. The reality is, if Jerry Remy never touched a cigarette, does he ever miss a Red Sox game? I don't think so. He's still going strong. There's no question about that. At the very least, he's still alive. But I can't fathom a scenario where he would miss a Red Sox game, if not for his ill health. It's really, really sad. May Dick Zamanski and Jerry Remy both rest in peace. Before I let you go, I do have some breaking news for you. The Titans have signed Adrian Peterson. So maybe Jeremy McNichols has some competition. In all likelihood, though, Peterson's going to be the second running back. I mean, he is really a shell of his former self. He was not good for the Lions last year. Averaged less than 4 yards a carry. I mean, he hasn't played at all this year. How good is he going to be? Le'Veon Bell missed a whole year and was dreadful with the Jets and the Chiefs. How good is Peterson going to be? It makes sense for the Titans. I don't begrudge the logic behind bringing him in. He's just not going to have a big impact. You'll get a New York Islanders show tonight. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Tomorrow's show is going to be posted a little later. I want to make sure I can talk about all the NFL trades that should happen before the trade deadline elapses. There are some interesting names being mentioned. Obviously, Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Marcus May. But also guys like Fletcher Cox, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker, Kareem Jackson, Kamoko Toure. It should be fun. Also, I'll say this now. I'll remind you of this as it gets closer. But you're not going to get any shows the week of December 12th. I will be in Florida with my parents. Although it's kind of funny. December 19th, the Jets are in Miami. They're playing the Dolphins. We're going to go to that game. So I will give you a Jets show the morning of December 20th. There may be some other days off that week, but that's still way in advance. I just wanted to tell you about the week of the 12th and the fact that you will get a Jets show on the 20th. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.